The morning my father-in-law's estate attorney called me, I was standing in the parking lot of a Dollar General in Clarksville, Tennessee, trying to decide if I could afford both laundry detergent and the store brand pain reliever. That's where I was. That's who I had become. I let the call go to voicemail. I didn't recognize the number, and I'd learned the hard way that unknown numbers usually meant bill collectors or my mother-in-law finding a new way to remind me that her son's death was somehow my fault. I grabbed the detergent, put the pain reliever back, and drove home to the apartment I'd moved into 8 months earlier. The one with the baseboard heater that only worked on one side of the room and a parking lot that flooded every time it rained. I didn't listen to the voicemail until that night. My name is Petra. I was 31 years old. I'd been a widow for 8 months, and I was still trying to figure out how to be a person again. I met my husband, Grant, when we were both 24. He was a structural engineer. I was finishing my nursing degree and working weekends at a diner in Murfreesboro, where he came in every Saturday for the same thing: black coffee, scrambled eggs, wheat toast. He tipped 20% every time, which I noticed, because not everyone does. We got married 3 years later in his parents' backyard in Brentwood. His mother, Loretta, wore a cream-colored dress that was almost, not quite, but almost the same shade as mine. His father, Raymond, walked me down the aisle alongside my own dad because Grant thought that would be meaningful. He was right. It was. Grant's family had money. Not obscene wealth, but the kind of quiet, accumulated comfort that comes from 2 generations of careful living and smart investments. Raymond had built a small civil engineering firm from nothing, and Grant was being groomed to eventually take over. There was a house in Brentwood, 5 bedrooms on almost 2 acres, the kind of house that has a name even if nobody calls it that. There was also a vacation property in Gatlinburg, a modest investment portfolio, and a rental property in East Nashville that brought in steady income. Grant had one sibling. His older brother, Donovan. Donovan was 4 years older, lived in Charlotte with his wife Bethany and their 2 kids, and came home for holidays and the occasional long weekend. He was pleasant enough when things were going well. I would learn what he was like when things weren't. Grant and I bought a house in Hendersonville. Nothing like his parents' place, but ours. 3 bedrooms, a backyard big enough for a garden, a kitchen I repainted yellow on a long weekend in October. We talked about kids. We argued about what to name them. We had a good life. Then, 18 months into our marriage, Raymond had a stroke. He survived, but he wasn't the same. His speech came back slowly. His right hand never fully cooperated again. He couldn't drive. He couldn't manage the firm the way he used to. And Loretta, I want to be careful about how I say this because she is not a bad person. She just has a very particular way of loving people that involves a lot of control. Loretta did not handle it well. She needed help. Real, daily, practical help. Donovan was in Charlotte. His wife had a career she wasn't willing to pause. They had 2 children in school. These are all real constraints. I'm not saying he didn't care. I'm saying he wasn't available. I was a nurse. I lived 30 minutes away. And I loved Raymond. He was quiet, where Loretta was loud, patient, where she was anxious, and he had a way of looking at you like he was actually listening rather than waiting for his turn to talk. I liked him enormously, so I stepped in. At first it was just weekends, helping with medications, driving Raymond to physical therapy, sitting with him while he did his exercises. Then it was weekdays, too, after my shifts. Then Grant and I had a long conversation and decided to move into his parents' house temporarily to make things easier. Temporarily lasted 6 years. I won't pretend it was always hard. There were good parts. Raymond and I developed a routine: morning coffee on the back porch, the news on low, him pointing at things in the yard he wanted me to identify. He'd been a birder before the stroke, and the knowledge was all still there, locked inside him. He would tap my arm and point, and I would say the name, and he would nod or shake his head until I got it right. We went through every species in the Audubon Guide that way. But there were hard parts too. Loretta and I were never easy together. She second-guessed my nursing decisions, rearranged the kitchen after I'd organized it, and maintained a habit of referring to the house as my home, in a way that made it clear where I stood. Donovan and Bethany came for Thanksgiving and Christmas and acted like the house was a hotel and left without washing a dish or changing a sheet, and nobody seemed to think that was strange. Grant was caught in the middle. He knew what I was doing. He tried to make it right in the ways he could, taking over the cooking on my long days, covering weekend nights so I could sleep, telling me repeatedly that he saw me and he was grateful. That mattered. It wasn't enough, but it mattered. The firm had to be sold during Raymond's second year of decline. It broke his heart, I think, though he couldn't say so clearly. Grant managed the sale and handled the transition, and the money went into the family trust. Donovan flew down for the closing and flew home the next day. I gave up a full-time position at Vanderbilt during year 3 to stay home and manage Raymond's care more completely. I kept part-time hours at a clinic 2 days a week, but the loss in income was significant. Grant and I used our savings to cover the gap. When those ran out, we used a line of credit. I don't regret it. Raymond deserved proper care, and I was in a position to give it. Raymond died in February, 4 years into our arrangement. He went peacefully, in the room we'd set up for him on the first floor, with the window facing the backyard so we could see the bird feeders. I was holding his hand. Grant was on one side, Loretta on the other, and for a few days after, we were all just people who had loved the same man. That didn't last. Grant died 7 months later. An aneurysm, undetected, while he was running on the greenway near our house. He was 34 years old. He had no symptoms. There was no warning. He was just gone. I don't know how to describe the year that followed. I know I kept working. I know I kept eating. I know I sat through the funeral and the reception and the weeks of casseroles on the doorstep and phone calls I didn't answer. At some point, Loretta asked me with real gentleness if I might want to find my own place because she thought it might help me to have a fresh start. I said yes, because I was so deep in grief that I couldn't think clearly, and also because I had no idea what was coming. I found the apartment in Clarksville. I moved in with my furniture and my clothes and the yellow kitchen cabinet door I'd saved from the house in Hendersonville before we sold it. I enrolled in an advanced practice program I'd been putting off for years. I rebuilt, slowly. The way you do when rebuilding is the only option left. 8 months later, standing in the parking lot of a Dollar General, an attorney left me a voicemail. His name was Mr. Eude Calloway. No relation to anyone, just the name on the voicemail, and he represented the estate of Raymond Lee Sutherland. He said there were documents that required my attention. He said it was important that I call back. I sat in my car and listened to the message 3 times. My first thought was that there had been some mistake. Raymond's estate had been handled. There had been a trust reading 8 months earlier, shortly after Grant died. And I had been told, by Loretta, not by an attorney, that everything had been consolidated and was going to Loretta as surviving spouse, with provisions for Donovan and eventually his children. I hadn't questioned it. I was grieving my husband. I had no energy left for anything else. My second thought was that this was some kind of billing issue, a medical bill that had fallen through the cracks, a property tax notice that had come to the wrong address. I called back the next morning. Mr. Tyre, Calloway's assistant, put me on hold for about 4 minutes, and then he came on the line, and his voice was careful and measured in the way that attorneys' voices sometimes are when they are about to tell you something significant. He said that Raymond had maintained a separate legal document, not the family trust, but a standalone instrument, that had been prepared by a different firm without Loretta's knowledge, approximately 3 years before his death. He said that document had only recently come to light, found by a former paralegal who had worked on it and reached out to the firm after seeing Grant's obituary. He said that document named me as a beneficiary. I said, "I'm sorry?" He repeated it. I sat down on the floor of my apartment, right there in the kitchen, and I stayed on the phone. Donovan called me 4 days later. I don't know how he found out. I assume Loretta told him because I certainly hadn't said anything, but he called on a Tuesday evening, and the version of Donovan I heard on the phone was not the pleasant holiday visit version. This one was tense and clipped, and chose his words like a man who had already spoken to his own attorney. He told me that Raymond had not been of sound mind in the years before his death, and that anything signed during that period should be examined carefully. I asked him what he meant by that. He said he just wanted to make sure the right people got what they were entitled to. I said, "What are you suggesting, Donovan?" He said he wasn't suggesting anything. He just thought I should be aware that the family intended to look into it. I said okay, and I got off the phone, and I called Mr. Calloway's office first thing the next morning. What I learned over the following 3 weeks was more than I had been prepared for. Raymond had been paying attention. That's the simplest way I know how to put it. While I was driving him to appointments and sitting through PT sessions and learning the names of every bird in the eastern United States, he had been watching. He had watched me sacrifice my career, my savings, my time, and my young marriage to make sure he was comfortable and cared for. He had watched his other son come and go without so much as taking out the trash, and at some point, he had decided to do something about it. The document was a deed of trust, transferring to me a 25% interest in the East Nashville rental property, which had since appreciated significantly, along with a letter of instruction asking that I be given first right of refusal on any future sale. There was also a separate financial instrument that directed a portion of Raymond's personal savings, held apart from the family trust, to be distributed to me upon verification of the care I had provided. The paralegal who had located the documents had also, it turned out, kept careful records, and those records included something I had not known about: a series of communications between Loretta and the family trust's original attorney, drafted in the months just after Raymond's second stroke, that outlined a strategy for consolidating assets in a way that would reduce my potential claim to any portion of the estate. She had known, not about Raymond's separate document, that had genuinely surprised her, but she had anticipated that I might have some legal standing based on my caregiving role, and she had taken steps to minimize it. I sat with that for a long time. I don't want to paint Loretta as a villain, because I don't think she is one. I think she's a woman who was terrified of losing control of the only thing she felt she still had, her husband's legacy, and she made choices out of that fear that were not right. That doesn't make them right. But I understand the fear. What I am less able to excuse is what happened next. 2 weeks before the estate review meeting, Bethany called me. Not Donovan, Bethany, which told me something about the strategy they had settled on. She was warm. She asked how I was doing. She mentioned how hard the last year had been for all of us. She said she hoped we could resolve things quietly as a family, without it becoming something adversarial. I asked her what she had in mind. She said they thought it might make sense for me to consider signing a waiver of claim, given that I was moving forward with my life, and that pressing this would probably damage relationships that didn't need to be damaged. I asked her which relationship she was referring to, since my husband was dead. There was a pause. She said she just meant it could get ugly. I said, I know. I did not sign anything. The meeting was held at Mr. Calloway's office on a Thursday morning in late October. The leaves were doing what Tennessee leaves do in October, putting on a whole production, and I drove down from Clarksville with my hands at 10 and 2 and a coffee I'd made at home because I couldn't justify paying $4 for one at a shop. I had not told Loretta I was coming. Mr. Calloway had sent formal notice to all parties, so she knew a meeting was scheduled, but I do not think she expected to see me walk through the door. She was already seated when I came in. Donovan and Bethany were beside her. Their attorney was at the end of the table. Mr. Calloway was at the other end. When I walked in, Loretta looked up, and I watched her face go through several things in quick succession: surprise, calculation, and then a careful settling into something that looked like composure. Donovan did not look at me. Bethany looked at her hands. I sat down across from them, set my coffee on the table, and waited. Mr. Calloway read the document. He explained the deed of trust. He explained the financial instrument. He explained the letter Raymond had written, and yes, there was a letter, in Raymond's own handwriting, dictated slowly and carefully to the paralegal over the course of 2 sessions, in which he explained his reasoning in terms that left very little room for interpretation. He wrote that he had watched me give up things that could not be given back. He wrote that he had watched his other son, whom he also loved, live his life at a comfortable distance. He wrote that what I had done was not a transaction and he was not trying to make it one, but that he wanted me to have something that would matter, something real. He wrote that he hoped I would use it to build a life I was proud of. The room was very quiet when Mr. Calloway finished reading. Loretta said, "He wasn't well when he signed that." Mr. Calloway said the document had been prepared during a period fully supported by medical records confirming Raymond's cognitive capacity, and that a physician had been present as a witness. Loretta said, "I would have known if he was doing this." Mr. Calloway said gently, "That had been the point." Donovan's attorney started to say something about contestability, and Mr. Calloway's response was measured and thorough and made clear that the window for that argument was narrow and the grounds were weak. The meeting lasted about 90 minutes. By the end, the only sounds in the room were papers being shuffled and a heating vent clicking on and off somewhere in the ceiling. When it was over, I stood up and picked up my coffee, still half full, gone cold, and I put on my coat. Loretta said my name. Just once, quietly. I turned around. She looked older than I had ever seen her look, and tired. The kind of tired that doesn't come from missing sleep. She said, "I want you to know I didn't mean for things to go this way." I thought about what to say for a moment. I said, "I know, Loretta." And I meant it. That's the part I keep coming back to. I meant it. I was not angry, standing there. I was something else. Something quieter and harder to name. Maybe I was just finished. I walked out. The rental property transferred to me over the following 2 months, with the other financial distribution following shortly after. The total, between the two, was more than I had made in the previous 3 years combined. I'm not going to give an exact number, because it's not the point, but I will say that it changed things. Real things. The kind of things that had been pressing on me since the day I moved into that apartment with the one working baseboard heater in the flooding parking lot. I finished my advanced practice program. I passed my boards on the first attempt. I found a position at a clinic in East Nashville, which felt like the right kind of full circle, and I put a deposit on a 2-bedroom apartment that has south-facing windows and more closet space than I know what to do with. Donovan and I have not spoken since the meeting. I don't expect that will change, and I've made my peace with it. Loretta sent me a Christmas card. I sent one back. I don't know what we are to each other now. I think we are two people who were bound together by the same man for a long time, and now we are just not. Maybe that's okay. Maybe it doesn't have to be more complicated than that. I kept the yellow kitchen cabinet door. It's hanging in my new hallway, just as decoration, just because it makes me happy when I walk past it. I think about Raymond sometimes when I'm at the clinic, with patients who need more time than the schedule allows, and I find myself staying anyway. I think about what he saw in me, and what he believed I was worth, and I try to live up to that. Not for him, because he's gone. For myself, because he was right. The birds I can name now, all of them. Even the ones I'll never see in Tennessee. That's his, still. That part belongs to him, and I don't mind. I never did sign anything. I've thought a lot about why Raymond did what he did in secret. He could have told me. He could have told Grant. He could have said out loud, "I see what you're sacrificing and I want to make it right." But he didn't. And I think I understand why now. He knew that if he had said it, it would have become a fight. It would have been questioned, challenged, reframed as manipulation or obligation. By doing it quietly, by putting it in a document that could speak for itself long after he was gone, he made it permanent. He made it true in a way that no conversation could be. That took intelligence, not just warmth, actual clear-eyed, deliberate thinking from a man who couldn't always find his words. He found a way to be heard anyway. I spent a lot of years being quietly useful and quietly overlooked, and somewhere along the way, I convinced myself that was just how things were, that people who work hard without making noise don't get recognized, that the ones who show up and stay don't get the same credit as the ones who show up at the right moments and make themselves visible. Raymond proved me wrong about that. He was watching the whole time. He just waited until he could do something that actually mattered. There's something in that I'm still learning from. I think about Donovan too. Not with bitterness, because that would be spending energy I don't have on someone who isn't spending any on me, but just honestly, he is not a bad person. He loves his family. He just made a choice over and over to let someone else carry what he could have helped carry and then expected to share equally in what that carrying built. That's not how it works. Not in life, not in relationships, not in the long run. What you put in shapes what you deserve. That's not a punishment. It's just math. Loretta is more complicated. I don't think she planned to be cruel. I think she was scared, and scared people do things that hurt others without fully reckoning with the hurt. What she did, those communications, that strategy, came from fear of losing control, not from genuine malice. That doesn't make it okay. But understanding the difference helps me not carry it. What I keep coming back to is this. I almost didn't call back. I almost let the voicemail sit there because I was tired and grieving and didn't believe anything good could still come from that direction. If I had done that, if I had let exhaustion make my decisions, the outcome would have been different. Raymond's wishes would have disappeared into a filing cabinet somewhere, and I would have kept rebuilding on a thinner foundation than I deserved. Showing up matters, even when you're not sure there's a reason to. Even when the parking lot floods and the heater only works on one side and you're choosing between detergent and pain reliever, you call back. You sit down with the attorney. You don't sign anything you haven't read. That's what I know now. Not because it's inspirational, because I lived it.